And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. I am not Chip Patterson, but the good news is, unlike last week when Chip was back in prison, he is not in jail this week. And actually, it's a good story. Chip is visiting with his old cellmate, Scotty Scheffler, at Pinehurst for the U.S. Open this weekend. He will be back next week. He's currently following Brooks Koepka and Colin Morikawa. I am Tom Fornelli.
So am I.
Yeah, so am I. I think all of us are, but Chip's on the ground sweating his ass off following him. We're sitting in nice air-conditioned homes doing our jobs. I am Tom Fornelli filling in for Chip today. He is Bud Elliott. He is Danny Cannell. This is the Cover 3 mailbag, gentlemen. Who do we have winning the U.S. Open? Let's start with the question everybody's dying to know.
I know this is kind of playing the results a little bit, but Koepka at 3 under, top of the leaderboard. I would not have said him before. I would have said keep an eye on him. It's kind of hard to go against Scotty Scheffler. But I will remind you, Koepka won at Shinnecock, incredibly tough course. He won at Bethpage Black, one of the toughest courses out there. He does play well when the course is a bigger challenge. So I kind of like him sitting here as we sit here now through 11 holes. But how do you not go with Scotty Scheffler? I mean, I would always take the field, but if you said you had to pick somebody, the dude's been lights out.
I want Ludwig.
You got money on Ludwig?
Yeah.
He's got the skill. If he has to put it together. We'll see. This is a tough test for him.
How do you say his last word or his last name? Is it Oberg? Because it looks like Aberg, but it's Oberg because it has the umlaut above it, right? Or some little dots.
Yeah, there's like I'm not going to get into Swedish language, but it is weird to me if it's pronounced Oberg. If you put that little mark over the A, why not just put an O there?
We were doing our Calcutta last night for this, and one of the guys in our group is Scottish and sounds like it, and so he's calling out these names, and then he's like, "Okay, for 7," it's like 1, 2. I'm like, we're still like, who did he just say? Like this? Like, bro, that's an advantage to not like to speak English, but not really speak English. You know, it's oh man. Notes, corrections, follow-ups stuff on the Monday show. Monday show, or we didn't have a show yesterday. Monday show. I was like, hey, this guy on Twitter, and I forgot who it was, said the thing about how USC would have to play all of their games on the road to have a schedule as tough as Florida. That was Joshua Bud Davis. I don't know how I forgot a guy named Bud. There ain't many of us. Joshua Bud Davis, PhD. So a good follow on Twitter.
While we're on the subject, here's a good question to start the show with. What's higher, Vanderbilt's total wins on the season or the amount of strokes Scotty wins by this weekend? I'm going to go Vandy's wins because I don't think anybody's pulling away in this tournament on this course.
It's 2 under is going to win it. What do you think?
Sounds right.
I think there'll be somebody in it -1 or even. It'll be close. So I'll say Vanderbilt's win total is higher.
Works for me. We'll start with some very interesting news that dropped just before we got on the show. Like I had done the rundown this morning and I was getting ready for it, and I was like, man, there's really hasn't been anything interesting news-wise in the last week. You know, everybody's kind of in that June mode. There's been recruiting updates, but as far as like landscape shifting college football news, we've been lacking. And then Dennis Dodd drops an exclusive on us 15 minutes before the show. Here's the headline. Big 12 considering private equity investment of up to $1 billion for as much as 20% of the conference. I'll read the story for a little bit. Big 12 members are considering a first-of-its-kind private equity investment to ensure the league's long-term financial and competitive security, multiple sources tell CBS Sports. On the table is a possible cash infusion of $800 million to $1 billion from Luxembourg-based CVC Capital Partners in exchange for a 15 to 20% stake in the league, those sources said. A portion of the money would go directly to the 16 conference members, and the partnership would give the conference access to CVC's investments and clients, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So he also goes on to write, the CVC investment would likely require the Big 12 to stay together long-term. That might require some sort of assurance from CVC that a new grant of rights would be signed in 2031. The investment would certainly be a significant motivating factor to stay together, but with realignment, anything can change, blah, yada, yada. Big 12 thinks it can double its TV rights. But more than anything for me, I want to know, how do you guys feel about a league basically selling itself to private equity?
I have mixed feelings, I guess. I mean, in some ways, didn't the SEC sort of sell itself to ESPN? Didn't the Big Ten sort of chop it up and sell it to us, Fox, and NBC? So it's potentially just a different owner, but I think ESPN and those folks have an interest in the SEC being really good long term, right? Whereas private equity may be a little bit more short term return on the money. Like a lot of times private equity is like they kind of had the leverage with the terms. So I guess we have to see what the terms are here for the Big 12. I think you take it in some ways if you're trying to bridge yourself to something next. Like what is the Big 12 trying to tread water for until the next big thing comes? Is that the 2031 when or thereabouts when the Big 12 or Big 10 and SEC deals are up? Potentially, I guess. I don't know, man. Are they trying to establish themselves as a league that is close to like the SEC and Big Ten? I don't know that private equity money gets you there. Danny, what do you think?
I don't have a problem with it at all because this is about how do you survive and compete with the leagues that have a financial advantage. So if you can somehow figure out a way to bridge that gap, and you have to sell off a portion of it. There's so many interesting things. Like, what does it mean to own 15 to 20% of the Big 12? Like that's when Bud's talking about some of the parameters. Like, what does that look like? Like you get a share of the TV money forever going forward, and you're just hoping that one day it matches the Big 12 or Big 10 and SEC. Because the way I read it, Bud, is a little bit like it was to bridge that gap, like the infusion of cash. I mean, in the article, it specifically says, the Big 12 is at 30 whatever million and the Big 10 is at 75 million per school. And this private equity firm could help, bridge that, which is something that, everybody, and Michael Alford, the Florida State athletic director, is quoted in the article. And that's something they've always said is they pointed out the gap, the deficit. How do we make up for that? And that's why Florida State has been mentioned with some of these private equity articles, and rumors and rumblings. So if it helps, like if it's stabilized, the Big 12 doesn't need stabilizing, but if it's salvaged the ACC, I'd be all for it.
I do worry a little bit about the short-term thinking here of the people that are making the call on this, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have, let's say, a board of governors for these schools and they largely just defer to the AD and the president, I mean, that's great. These ADs and these presidents want this, but they're going to be gone in 10 years. Like ADs and presidents don't stay somewhere for 25 or 30 years. So the people that are going to have to deal with the consequences of taking the PE money, they're not yet in place, right? What this allows you to do is not cut some associate athletic director who doesn't do anything, right? What it allows you to do is still, sponsor a whole bunch of sports, I guess, if you want to, and basically like now that we're actually going to pay football players as opposed to having the football players work and have all the other sports, get paid for by the football players. It allows you to keep some of those with the coming revenue share. I worry they're like, hey, now there's real consequences to stuff. Let's just borrow and not have to, pay the piper. And you know what? The people saying yes to this, they will not have to pay. They'll be long gone.
Mm-hmm. And just for more context here, like it doesn't sound like this is on the precipice of going through. Like from Dodd in the story, the discussion is to the point that 3 sources told CBS Sports a small working group of 3 Big 12 presidents have started digging down on the proposal. Sources said Commissioner Brett Yormark had a prior relationship with CVC. Yormark would not comment when reached by CBS Sports. So 3 guys are working on it. That does not mean the entire league and all the presidents in the league are totally on board with it. But the fact that, I don't know, like maybe this is a trial balloon. Like you're just kind of floating this out there to see what kind of reaction you get from people. But I don't know. I'm with you, but in that, and this, I'm not saying this is your mark, but there are people in this sport now where it's like the sport has changed so much where like the people who used to run the leagues, the former commissioners for a large part were not, I wouldn't call them educators, but they were kind of like career college sports athletic bureaucrats. Like this was their calling. This is what they wanted to do. They'd started off as athletic directors and they worked their way up to being a conference commissioner. But then you see, like with Kevin Warren in the Big Ten, this new modern kind of version of the conference commissioner. It's not just that they come from a background of, entertainment or television or whatever. It's that they're kind of looking at this as something to check off on their resume. So, and again, I'm not saying this is your mark, but I also have the concern along with your idea of a lot of these guys won't be around when it's time to pay the piper. Like, is this something your mark is doing so he could say, look at me, I saved the Big 12 onto my next gig? You know what I mean?
Your mark, all the ADs and your mark will be happy because they don't have to make any tough choices. Right now, do you think your mark will be there when it comes time to pay this back? I don't. Like, what are the odds of your mark's the commissioner in 10 years?
Not high.
Not zero, but probably close to zero. So he's not going to have to deal with these, and he's going to keep the people who employ him, the ADs and the schools, pretty happy. So, like, I don't know. I think this is where you need like a strong board of governors or board of trustees at these schools. Say, wait a second, like, what are we actually getting from this? Like, are we doing this in place of some fiscal responsibility? Now, I will say the Big 12 to me is kind of perfect for this in the way that, like, your mark has shown the willingness to try different things. And some of them I think are just, there's that John Wooden quote, like, don't confuse activity for accomplishment. But I mean, if you have the Big 12, I mean, you have a lot of very, very similarly situated brands. Nobody's playing for a national title, right? At least not realistic aspirations of one. Nobody's really all that awful. You have a lot of close games. Like, I think they could get it really, like, strongly in bed with the gambling operators. I think they could be a conference that changes some of their rules in terms of, like, gameplay and whatnot, right? Like, if we have more autonomy, more control over that stuff, I think there's a way to maybe make the Big 12 a little more gimmicky and a lot more exciting. And, like, maybe that increases their ratings or whatnot. Whereas I don't think you can do that with the SEC or the Big 10, because there's more tradition there that people are attached to.
The other thing too, with, like, sometimes private equity works. I'm not going to sit here and say that doing this in businesses in a larger sense is bad for everybody, because it wouldn't exist like this if it didn't work. Sometimes my concern is when it doesn't work, it goes really bad. Like, you get stripped for parts. And that to me is like the risk reward factor here. Like, if you're the Big 12 and you take this, is this infusion of cash truly going to be enough to help you compete for, like, a national title, like, to have those kind of programs, if that's what your goal is? Because you have to figure out, is that worth what the other side of this was when the bill comes due? Because I can tell you right now, these companies, when they're putting the money in, I'll say this, I'm Italian, so I could say this. It's kind of like yeah, oh, this happened. I don't care. F you, pay me. You owe me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to call it outright racketeering, but there is that kind of vibe to some of this sometimes in the end when the bill is due. It's like, oh, I don't care what your problems are. You still owe me this. It's in the contract we signed. It's in the deal. We will just completely destroy you and take everything you have to get what's owed to us if we have to. We don't care if you exist anymore. So to me, that is always going to be the primary concern, because even if this sport is changing in the Big 12 and the ACC, like, we see conferences go away. The Pac-12 just died in the last 12 months. It's completely gone. But I don't want to see that. It's like, I want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So I don't know. It's just, is it worth that risk so Oklahoma State can have an easier access to a national title? That's what they got to figure out.
I would say, I'd say I would disagree somewhat, Bud, because I do think there are programs that could compete for a national title if they were given an infusion of cash. I mean, Oklahoma State at their height was when they had the T. Boone Pickens money come rolling in, and they were rolling in it. Like, I think TCU played for a natty. I know it wasn't even close, and we've talked a lot about that season, how it was a little bit fluky. But I think you better not let Coach Prime hear you say no one's playing for a national title. But there are, I think there are Utah is a program that, was dominating the Pac-12. So I think that's where they may not be now, but given an infusion of cash to help make that up. And when it does go to 2025, and who knows what the numbers are going to be, when it does start to go to paying the players, if you want to prevent that gap from going further with how much you're able to pay the players, like, if they don't get infusion of cash, the Big 12 and ACC, wait till you see where all the talent resides. Like, the best
it already
talent
does.
But the gap
why does
is
the Big
big.
12, like, I don't think the Big 12's in trouble.
I don't think so either.
I think the Big 12 is kind of fine as is.
I agree with, but if you wanted national championship caliber teams that could compete with Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan, then how do you do that? You have to have an infusion of cash.
Are you going to distribute it equally to everybody?
I don't think
you're going to let one team kind of build it up?
That's
Oh,
going to be
that's
another interesting.
Because I think if you distribute it equally, you're still not going to be able to get close to there, right? If you let one team build it up, you're like, okay, Utah, keep doing your thing, and we're going to give you 5 more 5 stars. Then maybe.
How many teams are in the Big 12 now?
16 or 17.
They
were 12. They're adding 4. It's got to be 16.
So if it's a majority vote situation, suddenly 9 schools are going to get more than the other 7, and it's going to be like, all right, let's put it to a vote. All right. So that's some fun discussions going. Let's get back to some more questions though. Here is all right. Why does a former NFL quarterback and a current media personality have to fly Spirit?
All right.
So how much
Why
did
does it
the trip
make
end
it
up
feel like-
costing us, Daniel?
Okay. Now I get Spirit is what's the word for it? Economy airline? Like how would you
Budget
describe
airline.
it? Economy airline. So I went to the islands. What would you guys rather do? I am a Delta Diamond. I will never cheat on them again, by the way. Diamond medallion flyer. Like I fly Delta 90% of the time. As I was booking this trip with my wife, there was one direct flight from Fort Lauderdale to St. Martin. It was significantly cheaper, but it was the ease of getting there direct, 3 hours, or Delta through Atlanta. It was like an 8-hour travel day. So I was like, you know what? I'll suck it up. I'll try it. We were on time. Like we left on time. We got there safe. We landed, touchdown. 5 out of the 6 bags of our party got there. Just happened to be my wife's. Did not. Why is Spirit? But like Spirit are like the comments when I put this, because we did lose the bag. We got it back literally the day we were coming back. Like we picked it up and checked it to go home, which was great timing. But people acted like you're on welfare if you're flying Spirit. Like it's not that bad. Like it's not like you're taking the bus. Like if I was taking a bus or some ferry over there, like I get it. But it's still an airline.
I love that you just flew Spirit. They lost your wife's bag, and you're like, well, what's so bad about Spirit? It's like, because that happens all
I
the
think they're
damn
awful.
time with
I think they're awful. I will never fly them again. But I don't think there is like the because there were a lot of people that made it safe. There was 2 other people that didn't have their bag there with them, so they're not happy either. But they're not that bad. I won't fly them again.
Did you like rub your beard for wisdom? Was you contemplating what to do just to annoy her, like about the beard?
Yes. I did cut in I did shave a little off the sides, left the sideburns.
Look at that, man.
Wow.
This is solid. My thing is like if you put all the work in and all those years to be like lifetime diamond, then I think you gotta cash that in lifetime. Like you gotta fly Delta.
Yeah. It was just the ease on the way. On the way back, we took Delta. It was great. We got upgraded first class. Like it was perfect. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. It is the Greyhound of the skies. That is for sure. What is the Delta of the buses?
I do have a similar, like your wife calling you an idiot story. So she was not in a great mood on Monday. Yeah, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. And we really needed some Clorox wipes. And I was like, I'm gonna take the boys and get out of here because I think you need some like non-us around you time. And we really only needed Clorox wipes and like one other small thing. So we walk into Target and I didn't see the carts immediately, and I was like, all right, where's the carts? And my boys were like, oh, Mom doesn't make us use a cart. I was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. Horrendous decision, by the way. Like at home, they are so shitty at hide and seek. In Target, they're like, SEAL Team 6. It's ridiculous. And then they're tackling each other in the aisle, and like they're as loud as possible. I end up suitcase carrying the 2-year-old throughout Target. The 5-year-old, I kind of had him by the back of the shirt. I was like, hey, like we're getting Clorox wipes and we're bugging out. Okay, so yeah. And I come home, she's like, are you? Can't really use the word that she used on me, but I was like, yeah. She's like, man, you're good at your job. Everything else, I don't know. This is kind of questionable.
I will say, losing the luggage could not happen to a worse person than my wife. Like if it was me, we would have been fine. Like just go to the little tacky, like little cheap beach store that's all touristy. Give me some board shorts and a tank top, and I'm good to go. And some flip flops. We spent half the trip looking for clothes because there was not the best options. Oh my!
I'm sure it was cheap.
Yeah, for sure.
You saved all that money on Spirit, man. You got a lot of money to get a new wardrobe.
I saved all the receipts. I have them ready to submit. Spirit did warn me. They said you can buy stuff, but it has to be within reason. I'm curious to see what within reason means. We're about to find out.
We need to get to an ad break within reason, so we're going to do that right now. Coming up on the other side, we're going to get to more of your questions, including one that asks really what the future of the group of 5 is. Will they be able to compete, or are they just going to be a Power 4 feeding machine? All that and more next.
Have you heard of semaglutides? Ozempic, Mounjaro?
Hartman, this could be dangerous. Let's do it.
South Park, The End of Obesity. New exclusive event, now streaming. Exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, this is a mailbag episode, and we have answered some of your live questions, but I feel like we should get to a mailbag question. We're going to start with this one from Mopper. I have no idea how to say your name, bro, but thank you for the question and thank you for the 5-star review. Here it is. In the modern era of college football, with unlimited transfers, NIL, and the general consolidation of talent into fewer and fewer elite programs, will we ever see a group of 5 programs stockpile and grow old with talent ever again? For example, the Luke Fickell era Cincinnati Bearcats had 17 players drafted off the 2019 to 21 teams, including 9 in the 2021 draft. The UCF run from 2017 to 19 produced 12, including 4 in 2018. Boise State had 14 draft picks off their 2010 to 13 teams. The question is, what will it take for a G5 team in the current landscape to repeat the feat? Excellent player evaluation, a Moneyball approach to talent evaluation, focusing on an overlooked skill, bribing PFF to ensure that video playback does not work on any search of your good players. Is this even possible? I would love to hear the 4 horsemen of the beard apocalypse tackle this subject.
I think it's gonna be harder and harder to have even repeat appearances in a playoff. I think you'll have repeat conference champions. It's gonna take money. Like Liberty's the one program that I look at that could get guys to hang around, and they showcased that this last year by not losing some of their players. But I do believe that the group of 5 level is going to be feeder program, where if you have a quarterback or just players in general who haven't played much or they've played sparingly, and then they all kind of come together. But as soon as they play well, they are going to get plucked from your roster. That's just the reality.
I mean, you think about these teams that he named. I think conference expansion is the biggest factor here, right? Like, I mean, TCU used to be G5, Utah used to be G5, BYU used to be G5, UCF, Cincinnati, they used to be G5. I mean, who else? Like, I'm probably missing a few more who have, Louisville used to be. I mean, the Big East was not technically the G5, but the AAC certainly in kind of like the last dying days, they were. So I think for the most part, the Power 5 league or Power 4 leagues, I guess we got to say that now, have identified the G5 teams that have a real shot to do something like this and have gobbled them up. I mean, Houston, SMU as well, like the chat is pointing out. I mean, the best of the G5 teams now weren't top 10 G5 type programs a decade ago in terms of ability or resources. So, and we could talk about NIL in the portal, and I do think that has decreased the talent level among those G5 teams. But I don't think that the best teams are more talented than they used to be. I actually think the talent is much more spread out at the top of the sport, because it's just people aren't going to run a $35 million payroll to keep every single kid they want. Like look at Georgia. They lost Dumas Johnson, in my opinion, because they didn't want to pay him, what it would have taken. Now, was he going to get beaten out? Yeah, possibly, but he would still have been like the best damn backup at linebacker in the country. And in prior years, you would have kept that kid, right? But now with the portal and with NIL, your DPP and your collective have to work together to make decisions basically on your own imposed salary cap for the most part, unless you're just a program that doesn't have one in a given year, I guess. So I don't think that. I mean, I think there's a lot more talent among like the top 20 or 30 programs than there used to be. So it does hurt the G5, but I would disagree with the contention of the question that there is like more talent concentrated among like the 3 or 4 programs.
All right, this next question is somewhat along the same lines, but it kind of involves what you just broached on, is that these teams that was mentioned in the last question have moved up a level, and one of those teams is UCF. So this is from Kyle, a huge fan of the podcast, a loyal listener since the Barton days. Growing up in the Orlando area and a UCF alum, I have had a front row seat to some unprecedented success for the Knights. BCS bowl wins, invitations to the Power Four, rest in peace Pac-12, and still, the program wants more. My question is this even possible? The program has talked about its desire to compete for conference titles and be on par with Florida State and Florida one day. Outside of building a time machine to create 60 years of college football history, how does a still relatively young program achieve these goals? How long will it take? Looking forward to the UCF summer school and the rest. Thanks, guys.
Well, UCF Summer School already ran, so I hope he really enjoyed that one we had with Stephen Leonard on. So actually, I was talking to him about this the other day. So UCF has, I think it's the largest school in the country.
It's one of them for sure, yeah.
Its alumni base is really, really young. Let me see here. Let me see. 37 or 370,000 living alumni. Average age of that alumni base is 34. So I mean, there is definitely a lot of potential for growth there in a way that it's probably not at most other Big 12 schools. I would say. I mean, this area is exploding. I mean, we bought our house in 2019. It's more than doubled in value in 5 years. So, I mean, I live like 8 minutes from UCF. It still takes a long ass time, man.
Mhm.
Like, it helps a lot if your parents and your grandparents and your uncle and your high school coach and your youth coach, if they grew up idolizing a program, and nobody grew up idolizing UCF. So it does take some generations, but in terms of like long-term potential, if they play it right and they keep investing in it, and they charge a lot in student fees, and they have a big school, so they do bring in quite a bit there. I think there's long-term potential. Probably not while we're doing this show, but 40 years from now, sure.
I mean, they beat Florida the last time they played, so they're already kind of there. It's just I think they could have windows. I mean, the fact of where they're located, and not only because of real estate and attractiveness, but the talent that's in the state and nearby, I think helps them a tremendous amount. They're still fairly young in the bigger picture. They've only been, I mean, especially at the P4 level, just joining the Big 12 for just not like a year ago. But I think they could be a threat to win a national championship within a decade, maybe even sooner.
Clip that.
10
I mean,
years.
like, they got a big. They're very online. Their fan base. If they're clip
Shoot,
that,
if KJ Jefferson gets it rolling, they might make the playoffs this year. Let's go.
Listen, I wrote the top running back rooms last week. I don't know how good UCF is going to be, but the combination of Harvey, Boone, and KJ Jefferson and a Gus Malzahn offense is something that I'm interested in watching. Like, I know it was good last year too when they had Reese Plumlee, but it's just the difference in size from Plumlee to Jefferson. It makes it far more intriguing to me to watch that offense get to work. But
and RJ Harvey.
Don't forget.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Harvey and Boone and Jefferson. So it's like you've got 2 of the top 10 rushers in yards last year in that backfield, plus Jefferson, who is not what I think any of us consider a great passer, but he's probably a step up from what Plumlee was.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And he can run. He's a bulldozer. That would be their second national title, by the way, in the next decade.
It would be. Like, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I will say they're in the right conference in that there is no dominant program in the Big 12. Like, had they stayed in the American, they could have dominated that league for a while. But when you've got that group of 5 status, it would be hard to be considered a giant, because like we were talking about, teams will come pluck you. And if you're a kid at UCF and you've got a chance to go to Florida State, it's a step up in class when you're still in the AAC. Now that you're in one of those power leagues and there really isn't an established power, I don't know how likely it is to be quick or within the next 10 years, but there's certainly there's much more runway in the Big 12, I think, than there would be if you were still in your old league. So I think that's important. We'll see. I do think that with the size of the alumni base and the intention of what they're trying to do. We can't completely rule it out, but it's not easy to do. Here's a question that Chip would never ask. And it's not even a question, but I'm pettier than Chip, so I'm going to ask it. It's from Bob 2457654765. Hey, Bob. Thoroughly enjoy the podcast. Generally, was very disappointed to see them spend an hour and 15 minutes on the tough and easy schedules and spend under 1 minute talking about the ACC. Really only discussed them to the extended impact of the P2. Then he gave us a 1-star review.
That was my
On Monday,
burner, by the way.
yeah, is it? Well, yeah. So on Monday, Bud, Chip, and I, we went long. I won't deny it. We went long on the Big Ten schedules, and then we jumped into the SEC, and then we're an hour in, and we're like, "Oh crap, we haven't done the Big 12 or the ACC yet." And we're trying to keep the show somewhat short, But Bob, we admit it. We ran long. You say you really enjoy the show, but then we did one thing you don't like, and you give us a 1-star review. Can you just? We're sorry. Go if you enjoy the show, don't give us a 1-star review. I mean, you can't sit here and say we're anti-ACC. I'm literally talking to 2 Florida State guys right now, and the other guy is a North Carolina grad. We are very pro-ACC on this show. Maybe not me as much, but the rest of us are very pro-ACC. So please, Bob, come on.
Yeah, give us a break.
And
Bob.
Tom is the most knowledgeable like the most knowledgeable on the ACC of any Big Ten person I know. Because of us. Like we kind of
because of you three.
Tom's like, yeah, NC State's crowd is really underrated. I mean, look, the only team that has a top 10 schedule difficulty in the ACC, or top 25 schedule difficulty in the ACC is Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else is outside the top 25. You got a couple in that like 26 to 40-ish range. And then you got ones that are like Miami, NC State, Wake, Pitt, SMU, Duke, North Carolina, that are like literally easier than a good number of G5 teams. So, and then Syracuse, which has, I mean, the Syracuse schedule is barely top 100 for me. So, all right, it's all pretty easy.
Which I think is perfect for the conference, by the way. Because you know what they need are those those, and I just looked it up this morning, the 10 easiest schedules in the country. I think 5 of them were ACC teams, and they Pitt and teams you mentioned. Like Pitt needs a turnaround season. They need to get better. They need to take advantage of it. Syracuse, the Fran Brown, they need to get off to a strong start. So, because I think the more teams you get bowl eligible, the more teams you get 8+ wins, whatever the number is, the better it props up the conference.
Like the 5 easiest Power 5 schedules in the country: Cuse, Rutgers, Hokies, Kansas, North Carolina, SMU, Utah.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I'd say that's in there for sure. Although
kind of some order there, right?
Kansas does play Illinois, but according to a couple of our guys at 24/7 Sports, Illinois is terrible. So I'm not, I'm gonna.
Oh man,
I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
Our boy Cody Nagel, he ranked the Big Ten schools by their skill positions. He had Illinois last. Had Iowa 15th. Iowa.
Wow.
Can you name
I would take Illinois skill positions over Iowa.
Can you name a skill position player on Iowa? Go ahead. Let's play that game. Damn it, he got one.
Only because they hyped him to high heaven and he sucked last year.
Mm-hmm.
So this year I'm trying to see if he can be any good.
I'm just saying, like, Illinois might have one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league, and you're ranking them dead last as far as skill position players. All right, we'll see how that goes. And then also it was Brad Crawford who had Illinois 18th in his Big Ten power rankings after the spring going into. It's like, okay, all right, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. So I'm just saying, I'm gonna go give Cody a 1-star review.
We're all learning.
That's right.
Like
that's a good idea, Grant. I'm gonna go give Cody a 1-star review. All right. One last question before we hit another break here. This one is, I just thought this one was interesting. It's a fun hypothetical. It's from Sam the Man 38. Great pod. I have loved the show since I found it in early 2020. Love Barton. May he rest in Vandy. My question is about 2 BYU guys. If Andy Reid and Kalani Sitake were to switch places, How long would Andy Reid need to make the playoff with BYU? And how many games or seasons would Sataki last before getting ousted by the Kansas City Chiefs? Love the work you guys do to keep me entertained during work.
I think Kalani Sataki would be a heck of a coach if he had Patrick Mahomes as quarterback.
Yes.
And I think Andy Reid, I mean, BYU's been a place traditionally, has had a lot of offensive success. I think he would be fine, but I think it would raise Kalani Sataki's stock significantly.
Yeah, I think clearly Andy Reid is a better coach than Kalani Sitake. I mean, like Andy Reid is really, really good. He also won with like Alex Smith, right?
Yeah.
Even before he had Mahomes. But like listening to Sitake talk about how he takes the perceived challenges from the outside at BYU and turn them into opportunities here at the Nike Clinic in Orlando. I like really question how many guys could do like a lot better than he could do at that job. I mean, BYU has had one really good year recently, and they had a guy who I don't care if he busted in the NFL. NFL still thought he was a top 5 pick or whatever he went. And they had a cakewalk of a schedule that year. I mean, it was pretty pathetic. So, like a lot of programs, if we take out the whole COVID year, what do you look like aside from that? I don't think Sitake is necessarily that bad of a coach. Also, like, do you have to be LDS to coach BYU?
I think so. I think
if it ain't a written rule, it's probably unwritten. Like, who's the last coach at BYU who was not LDS? Because
they just hired a new basketball coach in Mark Pope, and I'm pretty sure that was part of the stipulation too. It was like, well, who are they going to find? Like, who's an LDS coach? So I think so. I'm not 100% sure on that. If there are any BYU fans in the chat right now, it'd be great if you let us know.
I will text one. I'm fairly sure, not fairly sure. I have a strong inkling that you do have to, but
I will say Andy would be great on the in-home visits when mom makes dinner. Because Andy would be like, yep. He would be like, this is yeah, thank you for having me here. This is a great dinner. And moms would love him.
Sitake was talking about how his wife, Danny, you'll appreciate this. Tom, you will actually no, you go down to Tampa sometimes, so you will also appreciate this. How they spend their summers outside of Lakeland instead of going to the North Shore at Hawaii, because his wife's family is from outside of Lakeland. Like that's some good husbanding as far as like happy wife, happy life. Like there are very few places I would want to spend my summers than outside of Lakeland.
That's like flying Spirit as opposed to Delta.
Yeah, bro, that is man. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, happy wife, happy life. We go because that ain't nowhere close to the beach and it's hot as hell. And
not a lot going on there either. If you want to be secluded and like not recognized, it's perfect for him.
Yeah, nobody knows who Kalani Sitake is. Well, I guess if he's going there every summer, they might. But yeah.
All right. Coming up on the other side, who's the greatest college football coach to never win a national title? All that and more next.
There's some new players in town, and they brought the plague.
You got my attention. You don't want that. What happened to Kingston?
Mayor of Kingstown. New season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, welcome back. This question is very straight and to the point. And I think there's one very easy answer to this, but I would like to get into the discussion on other coaches afterwards. And the easy answer comes from the name of the person asking the question, named Michigan Knoll, which is just a hell of a way to combine two schools. Like, I wonder like the personality effects going on with that person. But Mailbag, who do you think are some of the best coaches to never win at all? I will start and say that I think the number one choice here is pretty obvious. Bo Schembechler won a whole, like the way Bo Schembechler gets talked about as far as college football historians, you would think the man had won like 5 or 6 national titles, won a lot of Big Ten titles, won a lot of Rose Bowls. Michigan never won a national title under Schembechler. So I would say he's probably at the top of the list, but I'm interested in seeing who you guys think would be right behind him.
I mean, John Cooper won a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one at Georgia that Danny's going to take. I mean,
Mark Richt would be up there for sure.
Yeah. You kind of got to think about like guys who had national title caliber teams that just ran into it like an all-time good team. You know, it like that Bama team that beat Georgia was pretty damn good, and they destroyed Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl that year. Like the SEC title game that year was the real national title.
See, this is where I think the coaches that we're talking about, and this is where I love when you can go completely off the radar. Like, I mean, I know a lot of the conversation was about Mike Leach and what, him not getting into the Hall of Fame, not being eligible. But how can he not be considered one of the best coaches never to win a title? Because he wasn't supposed to win a title at Texas Tech or Washington State, but he made them relevant. He made them competitive, which to me is the very definition of what a great coach should do. That's where or like a Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, like what he did with that program, making them competitive and relevant. Mark Stoops at Kentucky. Like that's where I think not the coaches because I think the coaches at the better schools that came up short, they might have underperformed relative to expectations.
That's fair. Whittingham, Chris Peterson, Gary Patterson,
Bill Snyder.
Yeah, for sure. Bill Snyder. God.
Frank Beamer. Like I think of coaches who like like you look at like Bobby Bowden built Florida State. He also won a national title, so he's not eligible here. But I mean, like the coaches who built these programs, because like Virginia Tech was nothing before Frank Beamer. Yeah. Kansas State was nothing without Bill Snyder. So, and like Danny's saying, they weren't jobs where you're really going to win national titles. Although Beamer came close. Like Virginia Tech did play for a title against Florida State. I remember that game. That was an awesome game. So it's. Yeah, I think of guys like that. And like you mentioned, Peterson, Boise State, nobody knew what the hell Boise State was before Chris Peterson showed up. And then
I got two in the Big Ten for you.
Go for it.
Barry Alvarez.
Yeah.
And honestly, as much as we like give him crap for it,
yep.
Ferentz.
Yeah.
Although I do think there are some Iowa fans who'd argue Hayden Fry is better or more important than Ferentz, but
that's fair.
I think they're both very good coaches. I think they both have done excellent jobs in their careers. It's just the way they've gone about it has caused problems.
Did we say Mike Gundy yet? I know a couple people have put it in the chat.
No, Gundy's a good call.
Yeah.
A crazy one for you, and I don't think it really belongs, but I brought it up on Twitter the other day because I wanted to test the limits of this idea that like if you really, really overachieve at schools that are like legitimately very tough to win at programs, you should be considered, because the College Football Hall of Fame has a ridiculous, you have to have a 600 winning percentage type thing, which is pretty silly. That's the reason why Mike Leach isn't in. However, and I got a lot of blowback for this, and I kind of said it tongue in cheek. Matt Campbell owns like 8 of the 11 best Iowa State seasons of all time. And if he keeps coaching, he'll probably have like all 10 of the best Iowa State seasons in the 150-year history of the program. Like, I guess we need to have the benefit of time after he leaves to say like, hey, could they sustain? Or if they go back to being ass right after he goes, like, oh, wow, like he really did have the secret sauce there and maybe deserves it. But I don't feel like he rises to that level.
This is easy. Flip it to the worst head coach to win a title. Gene Chizik. Anybody else?
I mean, probably Coker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call.
In terms of like, but I don't know. Like, it's a little harder to manage those personalities than I think people realize at times. And that team had a lot of personalities on it. Ed at what he did throughout his career, certainly there.
Here's an interesting question that Zach put in the chat earlier. Is the expanded playoff going to kill the Heisman ceremony? I doubt coaches will want their star players in New York for a weekend with a playoff game the next week, especially for West Coast schools.
That's a great point. I wonder, would they consider moving it?
I think so. I don't know. But I mean, because the playoff is now starting on like December 20th, I think is the day of the first games. And that is typically right when the Heisman ceremony is going on. So I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't considered it.
Does the NFL award, like, when does the NFL MVP voting stop? Does it
at the
regular
Super Bowl,
season or
with the voting end? When does the voting end?
I think regular season. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know the takes never stop as far as who's the NFL MVP, who had a good game this weekend. He should be the MVP. And then Mahomes wins in the end.
Maybe they push it up. What's the date of the first game? 21st?
20th or 21st, yeah.
Maybe you do it on like the Tuesday after the final week, which would be like.
Well, it's always, but you can still do it, and it wouldn't interfere with the playoff, would it? Because the
Well-
playoff starts the 20th, so that it's Army Navy weekend. That's the weekend that's kind of, so they do have that. They could let them fly there.
Yeah, but they've already kind of buried Army Navy weekend because we're gonna have bowl games on
Bowls.
that day now too.
Also, like, do we have to do it on a weekend? I mean, if the final weekend's the first or second, if we can get the votes tabulated, guys, and figure out who the finalists are, we could do it on like the 6th, right?
Good point from Isaac. I feel like getting notifications on your phone killed the Heisman ceremony.
Yeah, when was the last time you sat down and watched the Heisman ceremony start to finish?
I watch the last 5 minutes every year religiously.
It
Yes.
was.
But I think I do the phone. I'll just figure it out. I'll pull it up.
Shout
It was
out to
the
Chris
first
Fowler.
year they
though,
had the
for-
Under Armour game in Camping World Stadium, because I remember I went up. God, it had to be like 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know. Maybe somebody in the chat has the answers.
Yeah, I
on-
just
on when
voted
that
it. I
was.
don't watch it. All right, another question here from the mailbag.
Oh,
This
I
is
got. Can I ask this one for Bud? That's a really good one from Sam
Go
in
for
the
it.
chat. The last one there, 1150. Bud says that 18 schools recruit enough to win a championship. How many recruit enough where they can expect to make the playoff? This is where I think it's going to be way more interesting and fun, because I do think that number is going to increase. Where before, I don't know. Have you ever looked at it to make the playoff versus win a title, the blue chip ratio?
Yeah, I mean, I what you find there is winning is largely about talent. Making it is I mean, a good bit of schedule, right? So this year, I think there are like 35 Power 5 teams that you could tell me have a shot to make it, and I would not call you crazy, right? So that's about half of the Power 5, I think, starts the season off with I'm not saying realistic, but not crazy expectation to make the playoff. And then there are probably, all right, Tulane, Memphis, Air Force, Boise, App, Liberty. So that's what, 6. There's probably 8 or 9 G5 teams that think they have a real shot to get that bid potentially. So, I mean, you're looking at 40-ish teams that go into the year thinking they really have a shot, which is, I mean, far more than we used to have. Now, how many really have a shot to make it? Probably less than that, but I mean, there's some shot.
Is Rutgers one of those teams? Because I don't know if our listeners and viewers are paying attention, but Rutgers is currently ranked 9th in the 2025 recruiting class, and they will argue it's volume. And it's true. There is a lot of volume, but they also have 5 4-stars in that class right now, which is more than everybody else in the Big Ten, except for the big schools that you expect to have all those guys. Just powerhouse Rutgers. Just be on the lookout. That's all I'm saying.
Rutgers could make some noise this year. I was actually, spoiler alert, I'm working on a YouTube short I'm going to shoot after this, but before our next summer school, on conference title game bid thieves. So teams that are not a top 3 team in the conference, but because of the unequal conference scheduling, have a real shot to make it. So Iowa, and then also probably 3 teams in the ACC and like Missouri and the. I'm not going to give away the whole short because it's only 60 seconds, so I'll shut up and shoot it. But it'll be interesting.
Here's a good play. I think this will be our last question for the day here from Larson 303. Hey gang, love the pod. My question is, before we start this new season with new members in all the major conferences, what teams would you say have been the biggest winners of past conference realignments? And alternatively, who are the biggest losers? I'll start by saying I think one of the biggest losers has been Nebraska, who has gone from like at least competing for Big 12 titles before they left to not even really getting to bowl games ever since joining the Big Ten, despite being in the Big Ten West the entire time. So I would start there. TCU's a winner.
I think TCU's a winner.
Utah,
Florida State's a winner.
Florida State going to the ACC.
The Dixie
you're
Conference and
going way
Independent
back.
in the ACC. That was a big one.
I think all the
Nebraska,
teams.
I think South Carolina and Arkansas are big losers in that. I mean, they would have won so many more games had they stayed where they were.
UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, like getting the Big 12, escaping Group of 5. Because I do
think it's too early to tell on that. I mean, financially, yes, but as far as results, we don't know yet.
But yeah. We said Utah. Who else?
More losers than winners, though, right?
Oh, for far more losers than winners, because most of
Okay.
these schools have just joined to be more losses for the other teams in there. I will say, we just talked about Rutgers. It's taken a while, but I think Rutgers moving to the Big Ten has been a benefit for them overall, because like their basketball team is recruiting really well too. And you look at where both of those programs had been, like they were bottom tier football program, bottom tier basketball program. Shiano had the years of success in the Big East, so it's not like they haven't had any, but overall it was ugly. And now the longer they've been in the Big Ten and the more money they're getting on an annual basis, especially now in the NIL era where, you know, their connections in New York are beneficial, I think Rutgers is a team that is moving towards the win column as far as teams benefiting from expansion and realignment.
What do you think about A&M and Missouri?
I wouldn't
They've been
qualify
winners.
them as losers. I don't know if they're huge winners.
I think winners. I think getting to the SEC is just, and they both competed fairly well. I know it's been up and down. I mean, Missouri's coming off a historic season. They already played multiple SEC championship games early. You had the Manziel 10+ win season, 11 win season, Sumlin. And then I think it's probably benefited Missouri more than A&M.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the influx of cash.
A&M has so much money that if it was still in the Big 12, I mean, you got to think like they're running that league almost every year. But again, they'd have to have their act together, and obviously they have not. In Texas, you could kind of apply the same logic to that. But yeah.
All right. So that feels like a good place to wrap it up for the day. We'd like to thank you for joining us live. And if you're listening to us later, thank you for listening. And then make sure, if you want to have your question in a future issue or episode of the Mailbag, you can do it the old-fashioned way, not like Bob. Leave us a 5-star review, put your question in there, and if it's good enough, we will read it on the show. Or you can join us live on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/cover3 and ask it live, and we will answer it right then and there. We will be back on Monday with our looks on the schedule here. It says dark horse candidates. So we're going to be discussing dark horses. We've also got more summer schools coming out this weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you're not going to want to miss any of those. We've got Oklahoma State, South Carolina, TCU.
Yeah.
Look at that. I can read. So be on the lookout for those. And you can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Danny Cannell, and you can follow me at Tom Fernelli. And Chip, enjoy the rest of your weekend sweating your ass off in Pinehurst. We'll see you Monday. Thanks.
I got the update. For BYU, do you have to be a head coach? Almost always. To be an assistant, no.
Well, there you go.
I guess it's kind of like an unwritten rule type thing.
How much you think we can get? Anyways, we'll figure that out over the weekend. Enjoy your weekends. We'll see you guys Monday. Thanks.
Yes.